Zweig Group invites all AEC industry leaders to the 2024 AEC Small Business and Entrepreneurship Forum, the premier event for small firms in the AEC sector. Experience innovative strategies and insights on May 21st, crafted by Zweig Group's industry experts. Engage in keynotes and interactive sessions focused on recruitment, retention, and business growth. Join Zweig Group for this unique networking opportunity and take your business to new heights. Secure your spot today and be part of the AEC industry's future. Visit zweiggroup.com for more information. The Zweig Group team looks forward to welcoming you.
Welcome to the Zweig Letter Podcasts, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting guru Mark Zweig and his team of expert straight talk in your ear. Mark has more than 30 years of experience helping AEP and environmental firms thrive, and these podcasts deliver his invaluable management, industry, client, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Letter Podcasts let you develop professionally, wherever you are.
Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Zweig Letter Podcast. We are excited to bring you some of the best and brightest minds that the design industry has to offer. This time, I didn't have to go but about 4 doors down from my office to find one of the brightest minds in the Zweig Group space, and that is our own Richard Massey. Richard heads up the Zweig Letter, which is, I think, the longest running newsletter in the design industry.
It's got to be.
Yeah, it's run continuously since 1992, and Richard is at the helm of the Zweig Letter, and we have entrusted this special publication to him, and he's doing an amazing job. And man, how long has it been, Richard? How long have you been here now?
I've been here for 2 years, but I did freelance for the Zweig Letter for about 8 months. So,
right.
2.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like time. I remember when you first started, and it's like, man, it's like time just flies. So
yeah, it does.
It waits for no man. But no, we're excited to have you on the podcast. It's been a while since you've been on before, and our format is a little different now. We're not as formal and as buttoned up as we used to be, so we have more of a free-flowing style. Really wanted to kind of catch up with you and just find out what's going on in your world. And I think the last time before, there's a lot has happened since you last were on the podcast. I think you've traveled halfway around the world and drank some good red wine and had a really great time doing some research. Is that right? Or at least we'll call it, I'm using air quotes here, we'll call it research.
Yeah, and I'm using air quotes when I say research as well, but I was able to take a well-deserved research vacation to the southwest corner of France, an area that's known by several names, but Gascony is the most famous name associated with it, and of course, the capital of Gascony is the most famous wine city in the entire world, Bordeaux.
Oh, yes.
And so it was great to, France is the motherland for me, and as is England. So it was really nice to, I get off the plane in this place and I don't really speak French, but I felt at home pretty quick, and I never got homesick. And if I would have had $1,000 more in my checking account in another week of vacation, I certainly would have stayed without hesitation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, well, I certainly, it kind of coincided with our week at the Hot Firm event. So,
it did.
Yeah, but it was, I kind of lived vicariously through you because we were halfway on the other side of the world. We were in Seattle, and so there were several hours between us. So I could wake up in the morning and see what you were experiencing for dinner, and then that evening I would check out what you were having for breakfast the next morning. So it was a lot of fun following you. I love that. That's the thing about social media and the internet that we kind of take for granted, and you assume that it's always been there. It was never like that. I mean, 10 years ago I could have never followed you like that.
Right, and social media gets overcrowded with a lot of the political stuff and everything. But at the basics, I was in a little town called Bergerac, which is on the Dordogne River, and they have their own wine appellation there. And the bells were ringing, and I was drinking the wine. Yeah. And an old friend of mine from college, sent me a note on Facebook saying, I wish I was there drinking wine with you.
Yeah.
And that was special because it's like, I wish she would have been there too.
Right. Right.
But I think we sometimes overlook just the basic goodness that you can get out of social media, which is keeping up with the people that you love.
Absolutely.
And forget all the politics and all that stuff, and just remember that you have connections, and that you can stay connected through that medium, and that's what I use social media for. I really don't get into all the other stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, that's awesome. Well, today I wanted to talk to you. You came to me a couple of weeks ago and just said, hey, you're really working on there's a couple of things that you're working on, but specifically this episode, we wanted to talk about public-private partnerships, also known as P3s. And really wanted to kind of get into the nitty and the gritty of this process and learn a little bit more. I know there are a lot of our clients and other firms and people that are listening to this that are involved in a number of public and private partnerships. And so really wanted to just get your take on this article, which I think is coming out sometime after the first of the year.
Yes. In addition to being the editor of the Zwag Letter, I'm also a correspondent for C+S Engineer magazine. Mm-hmm. So I write a feature story once a month for that publication. This one will be coming out January 1. And I had a lot of fun putting this article together because there's a lot of promise with the public-private partnerships. However, there's also a lot of questions.
Right.
And so it's not a done deal. Yeah. It's not just something that governments are going to roll out and say, oh, this is a new delivery model, we're going to do it. So knowing that there were a lot of question marks around the public-private partnerships made this story even much more exciting to put together because, it's not set in stone.
Right.
Like, you pass bonds, you pass taxes, you build a bridge. That's the old way of doing business. So that is set in stone.
Right.
But the public-private partnerships, even though they've been around for a while, and even though they're well-oiled machines in other countries like Canada and the UK, here in the United States, it's still the wild, wild west as far as P3s are concerned. Right.
Yeah. And I know that there's not a lot of, you hear about these projects, and some of these I didn't know were public-private partnerships, but, you hear about some that some of the larger ones, when you think of them, would be like the North Tarrant Express in Texas, which I believe is, I think that's probably finished. The light rail Purple Line in Maryland, which is part of the Metro system. And the other one I know about is the Gordie Howe Bridge from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario.
Yeah, now that will be a flagship P3 program when and if they get all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. They had to push back the RFP process on that by quite a bit because they're still trying to put all that together. But an international bridge between two countries, if the Gordie Howe Bridge goes the way, the planners want it to go,
right,
then that'll be a huge shot in the arm for P3.
Right.
Because you don't get any bigger than an international bridge between the United States and Canada.
Exactly.
So that's way up at the top of the food chain.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So, you described, you wrote in your you talked about the standard model, the public sponsors control of each phase, design, construction, finance, operation, and maintenance of the project's life cycle. And then under the P3, a single private entity, which could be a consortium of several companies, assumes responsibility for multiple phases, accepting long-term risks in return for prospective rewards. Transportation P3s feature user fees or tolls, or in other instances, government resources committed via long-term contract known as availability payments, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So there are a number of ways to kind of pull this process together.
Right, yes. There's quite a few, but obviously when it gets down to it, the big one, the one that's going to attract most attention and most of the controversy, and the one that's probably going to be used the most for the bigger programs is where the private aspect of the partnership pretty much comes in and does it all.
Yeah.
And so they design it, build it, maintain it, finance it. They do everything.
Yeah.
And of course, they take all the risk.
Yeah.
But that's the one where, it looks like you could have controversy because, as the article states, P3 legislation is all passed at the state level.
Right.
And, there is a lot of political division in this country at this time. So think about, local state legislations that are split along party lines trying to figure out what all needs to go into this legislation.
Yeah.
And then the age old, what I call the regulators. We don't want, this big private company coming in and telling us what to do.
Right.
And that kind of sentiment is out there. And I point to that as one example in my article. We'll get to that later. But that's what makes this whole process interesting, is that it's not a federal standard that's been handed down from Washington, D.C. This comes down to local legislatures, and then, also filters down all the way down to city councils and county boards, because those are the ones who own the infrastructure.
Right.
Okay. Right. And the federal government owns some, but the vast, vast majority of highways, roads, bridges, airports, and whatnot are owned by the local and state governments.
Yeah.
So they're the ones who have to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, I remember, you see signs where something says such and such a private tollway, and you're like, private? How's it private? This is a public road. And it's like, well, not exactly. So,
right. Yeah. Well, the road's private, but the road's public, but the entity that's controlling
access to it and
the funding and all that stuff is certainly a private company, and they're making profit.
Yeah.
And, especially in the AE industry, we always talk about our margins and, where are you going to make your money and in construction. And in the early life cycle of a public-private partnership is where infrastructure firm or big engineering firm is going to make their money.
Yeah.
In that first, 7 to 10 year span when the risk is really high. Obviously, the reward is really high.
Right.
And so, but it is a money-making venture. And so the private entity is not going to go in to work on a big program if they don't think that they're going to make a good return on their investment. And that's just a fact.
Right.
And that's how some of these programs are going to die on the vine, because they'll get floated by state and local governments, and there's not going to be any takers out there, because how are we going to make any money?
Right. Right.
So that will play into it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a definite market factor here in this whole, that's wrapped up into this whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We're here in Arkansas, and I drive a lot to Tulsa, and I also drive down to Texas, and there's a lot of tollways down there. And
yes.
Almost everywhere you go, it's like, hey, don't even worry about it. We'll just send you a bill in the mail, and, you'll get something via the registration of your license, and it'll just go automatically there. But, these folks figure out a way to get their money for your access to those special roads.
Oh, yeah. Well, Texas has, I don't think they have the most advanced, but one of the most advanced public-private partnership systems in the United States. Yeah. And I go down and visit my sister in Dallas-Fort Worth.
That's right. You're from Texas.
And just paid one of those tolls yesterday.
Right.
And I got a letter in the mail, but it's a nice road.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Sam Rayburn Tollway that takes me from McKinney into Arlington.
Okay.
And it's a nice road.
Yeah.
It kind of peters out at DFW Airport, and then that's when the road gets worse.
Yeah, you could tell.
So the P3 road through there is pretty nice.
Okay. Well, that's cool. That's very cool. So talk a little bit about just some of the firms that are involved in this. And I know you mentioned some of the big boys. And as I was reading this article, since you shared an advanced copy with me, you were so kind to do that. As I was reading the article, I'm wondering, how are the smaller firms going to get a piece of this kind of work? As I would suspect that more and more P3s will happen in the coming years?
Sure. Well, first off, the first part of that question is there's an advocacy out there that was founded in 1985 called the National Council for Public-Private Partnerships, based in D.C., and they have a lot of members. Some of the ones that I reference in the article is Arcadis US. Of course, that's one of the biggest firms in the world. Yep. Bostonia Partners. CH2M, of course, and they recently merged with Jacobs. Yep. And then you've got a public entity like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Which is huge.
Which is, I mean, they move more people on a daily basis than anyone else, probably in the world, except for something out of like Beijing. And then, you've got the Purple Line in suburban DC, and the consortium on that is Fluor, Meridium, and Star America. So you really don't get any bigger than Fluor.
Right.
And so the way I see the smaller firms getting involved with this is probably if they formed a consortium of their own, or if they kind of piggybacked, or you ever see the wildlife TV shows about the sea, and you see like the whale going, and there's all the little fish that are on side of the big whale.
Yeah, sucking on them.
Yeah.
Little lampreys and stuff like that.
And I think a lot of the smaller firms, if they want to get involved with P3, would probably somehow be subs or form their own consortium that joins a larger consortium. Yeah. And we'll see how all that plays out. But right now, P3, I mean, the big boys, the big dogs are the ones that are really the muscle power behind what's going on out there right now, from what I can tell.
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were saying that, I do know that one of our clients, which is not a huge firm by any stretch of imagination, but they are working on the Purple Line project. I would imagine that they are a sub to probably a bigger firm.
Right. There's a pyramid structure to these things. And as you dig further and further down, there's more people and more firms that are interlocked into it. But obviously the ones that are going to move the dial are going to be the Fluors and the CH2Ms of the world. Yeah.
Now, are we seeing, is P3 a phenomenon? Obviously we're seeing it in other parts of the world. Is it a little bit more organized elsewhere as opposed to how it's happening here?
Yeah. In the big countries where they really have it, of course, Western Europe always seems to be a few steps ahead of the United States when it comes to innovation.
Okay.
In certain forms.
Right.
Obviously, the United States is a powerhouse for tech. But when it comes to infrastructure, the United States is still functioning how it's always functioned. And as someone who recently returned from France, I was on a toll road over there.
Okay.
A big one, I think the A63 south of Bordeaux. And it was a nice road. But Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom have well-advanced superstructures set up for P3, and that's basically their policy over there.
Right.
And so why that's the case, I have not delved that deeply into it, but everyone talks about the UK and Canada and Australia as being leaders. Of course, France is in there. They're always trying to figure out ways to move that civilization over there, so to speak. And so it just hasn't caught on in the United States like it has over there. But in United Kingdom and Australia and Canada, there's more of a national focus on that as a way to get it done.
Okay. So tell me about, what the prognosis or outlook is for P3 in the future here in the United States. I know you had mentioned that some of the bigger firms are making efforts to really get involved in this area. And I think you mentioned Louis Berger and some of the work that they're doing. So you want to talk a little bit about that and just how it's in the minds of some of these big multinational firms, how are they trying to embrace P3 here in the United States?
Well, the big firms are behind it because they know they can do the work.
Right.
And I think the prognosis on it, I mean, it's here to stay. And I think it'll grow. However, not all 50 states have P3 legislation.
Yeah.
And some states, like Texas, have very open legislation where you can do pretty much anything. Whereas in Nashville, Tennessee, the capital, they recently passed legislation where P3 can only be applied to transit programs.
Right.
Okay. So that's a big difference between transit, which is your trains and your subways, as opposed to interstate highways. So, they passed very narrow legislation. Colorado has pretty open legislation, but they had to tweak it. And there's a big dust up at the state legislature there not too far in the past about how to tweak their legislation so as not to scare away the bigger firms. And their biggest fear is that they don't want to walk into a close-knit neighborhood,
right,
with everyone looking over their shoulder, so to speak, with this very narrow legislation and this big, huge review process, because the firms, they know what they're doing and they want to play by the rules. But if everything that they do is subject to full review by this big, giant council, with 50 people on it, you're never going to get any work done.
Right.
And so that's one of the big issues with state-to-state legislation, which we have in the United States, is you could go to California where it's wide open, and then you can go to Tennessee, and there's a lot of constraints.
Yeah.
And so that's where the prognosis is that it's a minefield out there, and that you can figure out how to do your P3s in Texas, but you'd have to rewrite the playbook if you're going to do P3s in Ohio
or California.
California, because everyone's going to have their own little peccadillos in there.
Right.
And, one little difference in the legislation could translate into millions of dollars, in change orders somewhere down the road if you didn't do something right and you thought that you had. Yeah. Well, that's how we always did it in California. Well, you're not in California anymore.
Right.
And so that's the prognosis, is that it's tricky.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're going to be a firm that wants to do it in multiple areas. And that was told to me directly by a gentleman by the name of Leif Dormsio, who's quoted in this article.
And he's with Louis Berger, right?
And he's with Louis Berger, and he comes from, I think, the D.C. Department of Transportation. He knows what he's talking about. That guy went to Harvard.
Yeah.
And that was what he was talking about, is each state you have a different set of challenges as opposed to one boilerplate set of regulations that you have to navigate.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, and that it's perfectly encapsulated in your story by, I guess, some of the challenges that Nashville's mayor Megan Barry is currently facing with a major project that they're trying to do, because Nashville has just grown by leaps and bounds. It's not a sleepy little southern town anymore. It's not the home to country. I mean, it is the home to country music, but it's now the home to the Nashville Predators and, great cuisine and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So, yeah, well,
at one point in time, I'm from the South, and they used to call Nashville the Athens of the South.
Right. And
as you're driving through, you can see the Roman Greek columns, up on the hill and all that good stuff. And, Nashville used to just be Music Row and Vanderbilt University. Those are both hallowed institutions, and you don't usually think of Nashville as being out at the forefront of anything except for country music.
Right.
But yes, times have changed. And they're looking, I think it's a $5.2 billion.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a very big B on there. Yeah. And what they want to do is, I think it's 26 miles of light rail. The big ticket item, of course, would be digging a tunnel underneath downtown for these transit lines to run.
Yeah.
And so I that thing kind of popped out, all of a sudden, Nashville's got one of the biggest proposed public works programs in the nation that could transform that city for the foreseeable future. So
that's what they said about the Big Dig in Boston.
That's what they said about the Big Dig in Boston. But yeah, we all know. I hope Nashville can learn the lessons there.
Exactly.
But the thing is that it got me to thinking. What's Nashville gonna do? So I got in touch with the mayor's office, and sure enough, they said that P3 will be on the table for that.
Okay.
And they have the enabling legislation that authorizes public-private partnerships in the transit space, which is what they're trying to do. Of course, to raise the money on the public side, they'll have to raise the sales tax, the hamburger tax,
everything,
every tax that they have, car rental tax, basically any tax that they have in the Nashville metro area would go up. And so before you can get to any kind of fancy public-private partnership there, you have to have an old school, old-fashioned bond election,
right?
In the early part of the new year. So I think a lot of people around the country, and hopefully people are going to read this article in C+S and put their eyes on Nashville, because if a old sleepy southern town like that can stretch its shoulders and pass a $5.2 billion bond issue and run a P3, then that is transformative. Then you'd see a lot of people really wake up, because it would be unexpected.
Yeah.
And that would really be, to me, looking at P3, that would be the most recent arrival, so to speak, of the P3 model, if Nashville can pull it off. But Mayor Berry certainly has opposition.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people that say we don't need it. And there's going to be people that say we're not going to raise taxes and pay for something that other people are going to get to use.
Right.
So
it's interesting dynamics.
Yeah, the old school street fight has to happen first.
Yeah.
Before you can get into the newfangled.
And I think you're going to get into that everywhere you go. It's almost like when you charge people commuter tax to come into like New York City from other places. And it's like, nobody wants to pay for the infrastructure that's needed to make, especially commuting and transportation more feasible and more manageable. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that people are, spending hours and hours in their car and traffic and this and that. And we know that, in an enlightened society where we really take into consideration the needs of everyone, there should be ways for us to mitigate the kind of time that we spend in our cars nowadays and find more palatable solutions for everybody to get from point A to point B. And I know when I lived over in Europe, it was so much easier to get around. And like, Germany, I could go anywhere. I could go anywhere in any city, and I could literally get almost to the doorstep of where I was going. Here, like, just living here in Arkansas, it's like, forget it. I mean, if I can't afford an Uber and I don't have a car, I'm screwed. And it's just the way it is. So, and again, that goes back to the old inertia and the old momentum in a particular direction that we have in the United States. Is I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to get out on the interstate, right?
And we're going to pass a bond issue, and every once in a while. And that's just the way things are. P3, I don't know anything about that.
Right. And
they're not going to want to know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Todd Herberg's with the NC P3 in DC talks about is, if you really want these things to work, especially in a state that's not seen as that progressive, or an area that might not be that progressive, where it's never happened before, is you need someone to come out and say, this is a good deal.
Yeah.
Someone who's respected. Like in Arkansas, that would be Governor Asa Hutchinson.
Right.
As a great example. He would have to come out and say, redoing I-40 with the P3 is a good idea.
Right.
If he did not say that, I could not imagine a P3 ever passing in the state of Arkansas.
Okay.
Me personally.
Right.
But if Governor Asa Hutchinson came out, or whoever the governor was, and said, hey, this is a great idea. We need to move cargo. We need to move people, yada, yada, yada. We need to get behind this. And that's where P3 is for most places. It still needs what they call a champion. someone who's going to come out, someone who has a big position, high profile elected official, or maybe even a leader of industry, to come out and say, this is a good deal. And until you have people coming out and saying that, P3 is still going to have its issues.
Right.
And that's in the official language as well that the DOT is putting out. Okay. Right. They know this. And so this is not just one guy saying this. This is, you have to get people behind this or it is not going to fly.
Well, I mean, certainly there's still so much that's up in the air, and that will need to happen, as you said. And I think our dialogue is important because, we get it out. We might get this idea or information into the hands of some people that have been talking about it. And, there's so many different platforms and ways to, get the message out. And sometimes it's just the little things like your article and this podcast and, so many initiatives that are taking place around the country where people see the benefits of this type of public-private partnership, that where it really takes hold and gains some roots and really, ultimately happens.
Yeah. And they fail too.
Yeah.
And they, several of them have been bailed out. So, there's still it's that trial and error.
Yeah.
And it gives credence to people who say, we don't need this.
Right.
Because they do fail.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes this whole thing interesting is that it's, it's still, at least for the American market, it's still in its infancy, really.
Yeah.
I mean, because California is always ahead of everybody.
Absolutely.
They're, Florida, they're always first.
Even Texas for that
Texas,
matter.
yeah. But the true proof in the pudding is going to be Michigan, Ohio, Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, the guts of the country.
Right.
And that's where it's really we're really going to find out if this thing is going to be it or not.
Right.
Because, California is already in 2050.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be interesting. I will be, we'll be around to see that too. So that's good. That's the interesting thing. It's really only 30 years from now. So, I mean, hopefully I'm still around. Hopefully you're still around. It'll be interesting to see what comes to pass. And at that point, they'll have other boogeymen to deal with.
Other stuff, and Hyperloop and all that.
Maglev.
We don't need roads anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a Hyperloop. It's going to be interesting to see the long-term, in general, the long-term evolution to infrastructure in general here in the United States, because we all agree stuff needs to happen. I mean, the highway system is one of the things that made the United States a superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can go to other countries and you can be out on a dirt road real quick.
Yeah.
Or 1.5 lanes, not even 2 lanes.
Right.
In a blink of heart.
Yeah.
And we all know that if you've traveled.
Yeah.
And the United States is one of those rare countries where everything's paved until you get down to up into the Wood County area.
The deep woods.
I mean, everything else is done.
Yeah.
And so we need to keep that going or we could fall behind.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it's a fascinating subject, and that's why I write about it, because there's always a big story out there to write in the engineering space.
Oh yeah. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait till I mean, I've read the article, but I can't wait to see it come out and print. And we'll make a copy of it available via our show notes so people can kind of get a closer look at that. While I have you, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the fundamental changes that have taken place in the recent past with the Zweig letter.
Oh yes. Okay.
Why don't you? I mean, I won't steal your thunder. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the changes that have made that you've actually championed? We've been in meetings together, and it's been a big thing for you.
Yeah, sure. Well, my day job is as editor of the Zweig letter, and it was a conversation that went back and forth, and finally the decision was made to make the publication free.
Right.
And we did not make it smaller. We did not downgrade the content. It's still a 12-page weekly newsletter in full color, delivered to your inbox every Monday.
Yeah.
But what we did is we made it free because what we realized is that rather than the Zweig letter being a profit center, it would be more valuable if we were disseminating more information to more people. And it's amazing, just in the last couple of months, the Zweig letter circulation, national circulation, has increased by thousands.
Right.
Thousands,
Yeah.
several thousand. And the subscriptions keep coming in daily. But that's the big change. And, it's been exciting for me because I've always thought we had a good product. And now to be getting it into more hands of more people, and, in more parts of the organizational charts of these firms, I think it's been a watershed for the newsletter. And of course, what'll happen early in the new year, I'm going to wait till all the holidays are over, as I will put out a note, and I will be recruiting a few new writers.
Okay. And
I'm going to try and get, like that young PM, up and comer, someone who is extremely passionate about his or her position at whatever firm they're at.
Yeah.
To start talking about what they go through. And I want to put people on a quarterly schedule, so 4 articles a month. But if I could recruit 5 or 6 writers on that, that's a lot of information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and be a little choosy about who comes on, but really try and focus on getting people from great firms that are clients of Zweig letters or associated with Zweig letter or not.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've just recently updated the CEO questionnaire for a feature that we run every week called Conference Call, where we ask a CEO, I think, 12 questions about running a firm and company culture, and how do you deal with your PMs, and how do you hire in a tough market and whatnot. Just a lot of nuts and bolts about how these CEOs handle the monumental task of running a profitable AE firm.
Right.
And that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And we've just recently updated that questionnaire, and they're just now starting to come in, and they're great.
Yeah.
And so, we want to share that with as many people as possible. And I'm sure you can give it a plug. You just go
absolutely.
to zweigletter.com and scroll down to the bottom and hit subscribe, and all you have to do is put your email address in there.
It.
And that's
no
it.
name, no phone number.
No name,
we don't
no
need a blood type.
number.
We don't need anything.
No money. You don't
money.
have to give us your astrological sign,
right,
your zodiac, or anything like that.
And the nice thing is that we can sign up a whole company.
Yes, and we can sign up a whole company. If you wanted to send a CSV Excel spreadsheet with 5 email addresses on it, or 500, it doesn't matter. We'll get them in, and everyone will start getting it.
Yeah, every Monday.
Around 11 o'clock Central Standard Time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, there you have it, folks. I don't think I could put it any better. The Zweig letter is, in my mind, in the immortal words of Clark Griswold from Christmas Vacation, is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
Or maybe that was Rusty, his cousin. But anyway, somebody said that. And I think the Zweig letter is one of those gifts. And especially now that it's absolutely free.
Yes.
You need to take advantage of it. You need to get a copy for yourself. You need to make it must have reading on a regular basis. And I think you will be the wiser for it. So,
yes.
Yeah. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of that. And as always, we will publicize that on every issue or every episode of the Zweig Letter podcast, and we'll talk about it. But, that's pretty much, Richard put it best. So, well, man, we're so glad to have you on. And I know you're getting ready to get out. We're actually recording this show a couple of days before Christmas. So the office is abuzz with all kinds of holiday activity and peanut brittle and wine, and well, I don't know about wine, but there's all kinds of stuff flowing around.
Yeah, definitely peanut brittle.
Definitely peanut brittle.
Yeah,
so which gets in your teeth, but it's good. So
okay.
You gonna say something?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I hope all the listeners out there appreciate what you heard today. And I look forward to being back here on the podcast soon.
Oh yeah, well, we'll have you on in 2018 for sure. We'll probably have to do a follow up to this whole P3 situation. You've also working on some other pretty amazing stories, which we definitely we'll be talking about and teasing in the coming months. So there's a lot happening. I think 2018 is going to be an interesting year. A lot of changes afoot in the infrastructure space, in the design industry. So it should be quite interesting. And so all of you firms out there that consider yourselves to be on the cutting edge need to continue to listen to the Zweig Letter podcast and also subscribe to the Zweig Letter, just to stay on the bleeding edge of what's happening and what's changing in this industry. So, Richard, I want to thank you again so much for coming on, man. We really, really appreciate you. I hope you and yours have an outstanding holiday season, and we want to thank you again.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Thank you. Folks, listen, I really appreciate you taking in another episode of the Zweig Letter podcast. We really appreciate you. We appreciate our listening audience, and we hope that this episode was good for you. We love your feedback. So if you get a chance, when you have a chance, the Zweig Letter podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube, to name a few places. On any of those, you can comment on our episodes. You can also write a review. We would love a 5-star review. You can leave any kind of information or feedback for us. We take it all in, and we constantly listen to our audience because we want to grow and provide the best product possible. So we appreciate you guys so much, and thank you for listening. I don't have to tease the fact that you can get a free subscription to the Zweig Letter podcast. Richard's already done that. All that information is available at zweiggroup.com. Just hit the Zweig Letter link, and all that information is there for you to sign up and get that free weekly subscription to the Zweig Letter. So we thank you so much again. And just remember, we exist to make you more successful. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this Zweig Letter podcast. We hope that you can apply Mark's no-holds-barred advice to your daily professional life. For a free transcript of this or any episode of our podcast, please visit info.zweiggroup.com/podcast. If you want more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about finance, HR, and marketing your firm, subscribe to the print or digital version of the Zweig Letter online at zweiggroup.com/publications.